Welcome to Tehran, January 2026. If you're watching this on YouTube, congratulations, you have electricity. Because right now, in the country with the second largest gas reserves on the planet, they're burning the furniture to stay warm. We need to talk about Iran. Specifically, we need to talk about the money. How a nation blessed with everything, oil, gas, gold, copper, and a brilliant population, managed to engineer its own destitute, frozen, and thirsty collapse. Now make no mistake, this wasn't a murder. Sure, US sanctions were a heavy blow, like getting hit by a truck. But the Iranian economy didn't die from the impact. It died because for 40 years, the surgeons operating on the patient were stealing his organs to sell on the black market. This is the story of the smuggler brothers, the water mafia, and the $2 trillion nuclear receipt. This is how you bankrupt a billionaire. To understand why radiators are cold in Tehran today, we have to go back a bit. Meet the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. You probably know them as the guys with the missiles and the speedboats harassing Navy ships, but that's just their side hustle. After the Iran-Iraq War ended in the 80s, the IRGC didn't go home. They went into business. They rebranded their engineering wing as Khatam al-Anbiya. Sounds holy, right? It translates to the seal of the prophets. But in practice, it became the seal of the no-bid contract. The IRGC took over construction, oil, gas, and telecommunications. But they had a secret weapon that no private business could compete with. They controlled the borders. Back in 2011, even the then president, a hardliner himself, got fed up. He famously called the IRGC our smuggler brothers. Why? Because the IRGC was running its own unauthorized ports. No customs, no taxes, no questions asked. Imagine you own a shoe factory in Tehran. You pay taxes, you pay tariffs, you pay your workers. Then the IRGC imports 10 million pairs of cheap shoes through their private port, pays zero taxes, and floods the market. You go bankrupt. They buy your factory for pennies. By 2025, it was estimated that entities under the Supreme Leader and the IRGC controlled roughly half of Iran's informal economy. They became a vampire attached to the neck of the state. And the craziest part? They barely paid any taxes. There's a massive charitable foundation called the Astan Quds-Razavi, a name I'm almost certainly mispronouncing. They run the Imam Reza Shrine, but they also own car factories, mines, and enough land to build a small country. Estimated value? Over $20 billion. Their tax bill? Zero. The Supreme Leader explicitly exempted them from income tax. So the government is broke, but the charities are billionaires. The result? The government prints money to survive. Inflation goes up, your savings vanish, and the smuggler brothers buy more gold. But stealing money is one thing, stealing nature is another. Let me introduce you to the Gotvan Dam. It is, without hyperbole, one of the greatest engineering disasters in human history. Enter the water mafia. Remember those IRGC construction firms we talked about? They wanted to build a dam on the Karun River. Geologists screamed, "Don't do it, you're building on a salt mountain." The contractor said, "We can't hear you over the sound of all this money we're making." They built it, they filled it, and guess what happened? The water dissolved the salt mountain. The reservoir became a salt factory. They released this brine into the river, destroying the agriculture of the Khuzestan province, the breadbasket of Iran. They turned the most fertile land in the Middle East into a salt lick. And it's not just there. Look at Lake Urmia. It used to be one of the biggest saltwater lakes on Earth. Now, it's 96% gone. Why? Because they dammed every river feeding it to grow water-intensive crops like sugar beets and apples in a semi-arid land. The government allocated $1.5 billion to restore the lake. Where did the money go? Spoiler alert, it never actually existed. It vanished into the pockets of the bureaucracy. Now, toxic salt storms blow off the dry lake bed, poisoning the very people who grew the apples. In Isfahan, the river that defines the city dried up. In 2025, the farmers lost it. They put on white shrouds, symbolizing they were ready to die, and set up a tent city in the dry riverbed. The regime didn't send water, they sent riot police with pellet guns. They blinded the farmers. That is the water mafia. They steal your water, and when you complain about it, they take your eyes. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. The nukes. For 20 years, the regime told its people that nuclear energy was the key to the future. Energy is our right, they chanted. Well, let's look at the ROI, the return on investment. By 2025, estimates suggest the total economic cost of the nuclear program, including the direct spending and massive opportunity cost of sanctions and lost oil sales, hit $2 trillion. $2 trillion. Do you know what you can buy with $2 trillion? You could rebuild the entire infrastructure of the country 10 times over. You could desalinate the Persian Gulf. Instead, what did they get? The Bushehr nuclear plant cost over $11 billion. For that price, they could have built conventional power plants generating 5 times the electricity. And because they were so obsessed with nuclear, they forgot about the actual gas. Iran shares the world's largest gas field, South Pars, with Qatar. But gas fields lose pressure over time. You need massive compressors to keep the gas flowing. Qatar brought in the best Western tech and kept pumping. Iran couldn't. They needed $17 billion for compression platforms. They didn't have it. So in the winter of 2024 and 2025, production plummeted. In January 2026, the government had to shut down offices and schools in 2/3 of the country because there wasn't enough gas to heat them. Think about the irony. A country sitting on an ocean of gas has to close its schools because it spent all its money on nuclear centrifuges, which it can't even power because there's no gas for the power plants. When you steal from the future, eventually the future shows up to collect. Enter the pension crisis. For decades, the government treated the pension funds like a piggy bank. Short on cash, just borrow from the Social Security Organization. When they couldn't pay it back, they gave the pension fund shares in bankrupt government factories. So the pension fund became a graveyard for failed companies. By 2025, the funds were insolvent. The government solution? Let's merge the solvent funds with the bankrupt ones. They tried to merge the oil workers' pension fund, which was actually healthy, with the bankrupt state fund. The oil workers, the guys who kept the lights on, said no. In December 2025, they went on strike, and when the oil workers strike in Iran, the regime trembles. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about the looting of their lives. So the economy was already on life support. Then came June 2025, the 12-day war. After years of shadowboxing, Israel and Iran finally took the gloves off. Israel launched Operation Rising Lion. It wasn't an invasion, it was a demolition job. Their goal was to destroy Iran's nuclear sites. They also killed a bunch of the IRGC's leadership, I guess for fun. These two countries really don't like each other. Eventually the US joined in on the fight and they used their patented bunker busters to blow up Iran's underground nuclear facilities. In less than 2 weeks, billions of dollars of nuclear infrastructure, that $2 trillion investment we talked about, was turned into radioactive rubble. But they didn't just hit the nukes, they hit the energy infrastructure, they hit the gas processing plants in Bushehr. The rial crashed, hard. It went to over 1.4 million to the dollar. For the average Iranian, this meant their life savings evaporated overnight. The price of bread didn't just double, it became theoretical. The war ended in a ceasefire, but the economic damage was terminal. So here we are, January 2026 at the time of recording. The budget for this year is a work of fiction. The president presented a budget that relies on taxing people who have no money. They even tried to rebrand the currency, knocking off 4 zeros. They call it the Toman now, but calling a catastrophe a mishap doesn't actually change it. And even while the ship was sinking, the crew was looting the pantry. There's something called the NEMA rate. The government gives cheap dollars to importers to buy medicine. What did the insiders do? They took the cheap dollars, imported cheap tea, or nothing at all, and sold the dollars on the black market for a massive profit. Billions of dollars siphoned off while hospitals ran out of drugs. Wonderful. The tragedy of Iran isn't just about dams or dollars. It's about people. The young are leaving. The brain drain is hemorrhaging the country's best minds. Those who stay can't afford to marry. The concept of permanent singlehood has skyrocketed. Iran is growing old before it ever got rich. In 2026, the protests aren't just students wanting freedom. It's everyone. It's the pensioners in Shush shouting, "We won't live under oppression." It's the farmers in Isfahan standing on the cracked earth. It's the oil workers in the south turning off the valves. The regime spent 40 years preparing for a war with America. They built missiles, they built militias, they built bunkers. But they forgot to build a country. They forgot that you can't eat uranium, you can't drink ideology, and you can't govern a people who have nothing left to lose. It's no surprise that as of making this video, protests in Iran are rocking the regime to its core. This wasn't a murder, it was suicide. Economic suicide. And the tragedy is the victim, the beautiful, historic, vibrant nation of Iran, is still trapped in the room with the corpse. Hey, did you like the video? If so, please leave a comment, or drop a like, or consider subscribing. Every little bit helps. Thanks for watching.